Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Stephen House with DESI Food Nutrition Services. In this webinar, we'll be discussing medical statements. We'll be looking over the proper medical statement as well as how to correctly modify meals. In regards to the medical statement, a medical statement should be signed from a physician, either MD or DO, physician's assistant, assistant physician, or nurse practitioner. A medical statement from these individuals is required to receive reimbursement for meal modifications if the modified meal does not meet uh, program meal requirements. The medical statement must include information about the child's impairment, a brief explanation of how exposure to the food affects the child, as well to how to accommodate the child, as well as foods to be omitted with recommended alternatives if appropriate. Schools are required to give notice and information to parents and guardians regarding how to request a reasonable modification and the parents and guardians' procedural rights. In some circumstances, you might need more information than is otherwise provided on the medical statement. Cases that this might occur include when a student requires caloric modifications, either more or less. In both circumstances, I want a qualified medical professional to be telling me what calories to omit or what calories to add. A student who needs a liquid formula to substitute a meal, I would need more information from the medical statement because not all formulas are created the same. But please never deny or delay a requested modification because the medical statement does not provide recommended alternatives. Always work diligently with parents and guardians to obtain supplemental medical statements. LEAs may receive reimbursement for a meal modification request without a medical statement only when the accommodation can be made within program meal pattern. If a student has a common allergy to one fruit or vegetable, it may not be required to have a medical statement on file, but you can simply substitute with another fruit or vegetable. Always take note of the actions taken and acknowledging steps taken to accommodate students. This will help safeguard the students in all areas of the school environment. You are not required to update a medical statement on a regular basis. As soon as one is on file for a student when they enter into the school, that can follow them until their graduation day. Additionally, LEAs are not required to obtain written documentation from a medical professional rescinding or ending the medical order. However, it is recommended that in such cases, the LEA maintain documentation when ending these meal accommodations. The reason why we are making meal modifications is so that we can provide all students a safe meal and a safe environment to consume said meal. Staff should always ensure that all meals and snacks provided meet the prescribed guidelines and are free of ingredients and allergens that could cause a reaction. Schools should be ensuring that proper storage, preparation, and cleaning techniques are used to prevent exposure through allergens through cross-contact exposure. It is almost never appropriate to decline to provide an effective meal modification to accommodate a child's disability. An exception would be if a modification request would fundamentally alter the nature of the program. In this case, the LEA should work with the parent and guardian to develop an appropriate modification and suitable alternatives for the child. Keep in mind that offer versus serve cannot be used to accommodate a meal modification. All children, even those children with disabilities, must have the opportunity to select all the required food component or items for the meal. When making meal modifications, consider cost, resources, and the age of the child. Avoid stereotyping regarding certain conditions or individuals, as we must base the care of these children on facts and the medical statements provided. Keep in mind that meal accommodations don't need to mirror the meal substituted. A lactose-intolerant student can have a sandwich instead of a cheese-free pizza if there is pizza on the menu. In all circumstances, we should be making sure that the substituted meal has the same meal components or meal items as the meal that is menued. Lifestyle choices, such as vegetarianism, are not considered disability and do not need to be accommodated unless related to an underlying disability. LEAs are required to provide food portions in excess to the minimum quantity requirements only if specifically prescribed in the medical statement. LEAs are not required to provide specific brands unless the brand name is medically necessary. LEAs are not required to provide meals to students with disabilities beyond the meals provided to other students. If you do not have a breakfast program, you cannot start a breakfast program for one student. Modified meals that do not meet program meal pattern requirements due to disability can be claimed for reimbursement if the school has a medical statement that supports the meal modification. Schools will not receive additional reimbursement to cover the costs, which is why it's important to keep in mind your available resources when making reasonable modifications. Keep in mind that schools may claim a modified meal while waiting for the child's medical statement. Always err on the side of caution. As soon as you're aware that a modified meal is required for a child with a disability, start making the modification and document your efforts. Federal civil rights legislation requires that in providing non-academic services, including meals, school districts must ensure that students with disabilities participate with students without disabilities to the maximum extent possible. In some circumstances, it may be necessary to require students with certain special needs to sit at a separate table or in a separate classroom. However, in these circumstances, I want a qualified medical professional to be telling me that such accommodations are required. Schools are allowed to make meal modifications for students who do not have disabilities. However, these modifications must be consistent with meal pattern requirements. LEAs are always encouraged to provide a variety of foods for all students. Making accommodations for food preferences for religious, ethnic, moral, or other reasons can be reimbursed, but the meal pattern requirements must be followed. In not making fluid milk substitutions, a fluid milk substitution must meet these USDA standards to be served in place of cow's milk for students without a disability. Acceptable brands that we have found that meets this criteria include Pacific Natural, Kikimon Pearl, 8th Continent, and Indian Soy. Food service management companies must make these modifications and is included in their contracts. When your food nutrition specialist comes by for their administrative review, they will ask to see signed medical statements for all students with meals that are outside of the meal pattern. If you do not have a medical statement for a child, we will ask to see the documentation of your efforts to get a medical statement for the modification. It is important to keep in mind that it is only through the partnership between the school, the family, and the physician that the best result is going to occur for the students. More information on food allergies as well as medical statements is available on the DESE website under Food and Nutrition Services. We do have a few scenarios that we will go over in this webinar. Our first scenario, a student with autism is very sensitive to food textures and will only eat foods with a smooth texture. Is this child's condition considered a disability? And if so, must the school food service make a modification for the child? For those of you thinking yes, you are correct. According to ADA, any physical or mental impairment impacting the major life activity of eating is considered a disability. Some children with autism have sensory sensitivities and prefer food of a certain texture or color. They may require the same foods every day and need to maintain a regular routine. If a child's autism impacts their ability to consume programmed meals, the SFA must provide a reasonable accommodation, and the student's parents should submit a medical statement to that regard. Our second scenario. A school food service professional assumes a child's condition is not a disability because it is not listed under categories of disease and conditions in the ADA Amendments Act. Is this assumption correct? For those of you shaking your head no, you are correct. This assumption is not correct. As noted in the law, the categories of disease and conditions are not meant to be all-inclusive. Therefore, more conditions will meet the definition of a disability than are listed in the ADA. Each situation must be considered on a case-by-case basis. A parent or guardian requests a modification to accommodate their child's celiac disease. The food service director has a family member with celiac and feels the modification request should be changed to match their own family member's approach to managing celiac disease. Is this allowed? No. Remember, it is important to avoid assumptions and stereotypes regarding certain conditions, and individuals should never drive modification decisions. It is important that each situation be assessed individually by a qualified medical professional and modifications be made on a case-by-case basis. Our fourth scenario, a child required a modification outside the program meal pattern for her food allergy in the previous school year. Must the SFA obtain an updated medical statement at the start of the next school year? If you remember, we do not have to obtain an updated medical statement on a regular basis. Once it is accepted, SFAs can continue to receive reimbursement as long as the medical statement is on file. However, SFAs are responsible for ensuring that medical statements on file reflect the current dietary needs of participating students and may require updates as necessary to meet their responsibilities. SFAs should carefully consider the burden of obtaining additional medical statements could create for parents and guardians when establishing such requirements. But remember, the medical statement can follow the students as long as it is necessary. Our fifth scenario. A child who has previously required a medical modification outside the meal pattern no longer requires the modified meals. Must the SFA obtain an amended medical statement prior to ending the child's meal modification? Again, you are not required to obtain written documentation rescinding the original medical order. However, it is important to maintain documentation when ending this meal modification. Our sixth scenario, a child with a disability consumes their lunch at home every day. May the SFA receive reimbursement to meals served to this child? No. SFAs cannot receive reimbursement for meals provided at home. The school nutrition program meals are intended to be served and consumed on school premises, except for events such as school-sponsored field trips. Providing lunch meals outside of the school on a regular basis would fundamentally alter the nature of the program. Our seventh scenario. A number of high school students receive modified meals due to a disability. The SFA has medical statements on file supporting all the modified meals. Is the SFA eligible to receive additional 6-cent reimbursement for compliance with the program meal pattern? Yes, you will receive reimbursement for all modified meals with the medical statements on file. including the additional 6-cent reimbursement. Our final scenario. A large number of elementary school students have a peanut allergy. Should the school go peanut-free? Universal exclusions of specific foods is not policy, but might be appropriate. It is important to consider whether or not a specific allergy should be universally banned by including everyone in the decision-making process. It is important to also keep in mind that universal bans of specific allergens might also create a false sense of security, and while schools can control all food that is being served out of the cafeteria, it is hard to control all foods that are being brought in from home of students. So it is a question that is ultimately up to each school individually. I want to thank you all for attending the webinar today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email us at schoolfoods@desi.mo.gov or by dialing our number. We are always more than happy to address any questions, comments, or concerns. You can also reach out to me personally, and I am more than happy to assist. Thank you, and have a great day.